now we are going to get to our second panels, but before I do that, we have our Master of Ceremony who arrived, Adrian Howard. Adrian, thank you for coming and participating in this event with us. Adrian Howard, those of you who know, he's an anchor of CBC's local weekday sub-hour television newscast, CBC New Ottawa, 5:30 and 6, and an anchor of CBC New Late Night, seen at 11 p.m. weekdays. Adrian grew up in Ottawa West End, and attended elementary and high school at Ottawa's Ashbury College. Well, that explains your Marianism. He studied political theory and history at McGill University, where he was also station manager of the campus radio station, CQUT. Before coming to television, Adrian was the host of a #1 rated All in a Day on CBC Radio 1 in Ottawa. He has been a guest host on national CBC programming, including As It Happens, Sounds Like Canada, and The Current. Adrian has a keen interest in community involvement. He spends hundreds of hours every year on events in Ottawa and surrounding area. Please put your hands together for Adrian. Adrian, welcome.
Good afternoon. How's everyone? How are you? It sounds like you just had a very stimulating discussion, and I was privy to some of it. I'm really honored, first of all, to be asked to be here, so thank you very much for having me. I'm certainly looking forward to what promises to be a very dynamic series of panels that we'll be having this afternoon. I don't know what kind of mannerisms I have because I went to Ashbury College. But hopefully the mannerisms won't be too off-putting this afternoon. I'm really happy to have been asked to be here. Just to kind of give you a bit of background, I come from a family of 5 kids. My mother came from Antigua in the 1960s to this country to attend university. And I've always looked at my mom as being a pioneer because coming to this country in the 1960s as a young black woman, she was about 17 years of age when she arrived, was not easy. And she, along with a number of other young women from her cohort, had to work very hard to make space for themselves in this society. In addition to raising a family, my mother worked as a teacher for many years. And I always wondered, how is that possible? I have 2 kids right now, and it's a lot of work. It's a full-time job. I learned that when I had 4 months paternity leave, right? It's a lot of work having even one child. And so I've always marveled at my mom's ability to balance all the things she did and still kind of carry on in what wasn't an easy society in which to live. I have 4 sisters, so I understand what strong women are about. My grandmother was a bit of a force of nature in Antigua. She was a bit of a social activist, and she used to teach women different strategies of how to kind of, survive in Antiguan society. She was kind of a quasi-social worker. So that's my background, that's where I'm coming from. This next panel that we're going to be having is about positive mental health. And the reason why I'm so happy to be helping to facilitate this discussion is because I think it's really important that we focus on the successes, the fact that in spite of the fact that Somali women have faced many challenges having to navigate this society, they have been able to come up with strategies to survive, but also to thrive. There are many things, there are many lessons that not just Somali women can take from this, but Canadian women, Canadian society can learn from this very particular experience. So I'm really pleased to be participating in this process. I'm looking forward to learning as well. And I'm sure that you will find that this afternoon's panelists will be very engaging and very provocative, and hopefully we'll have a very very animated question and answer session this afternoon. So we have three presenters. We have three panelists with us this afternoon. Our first presenter is Omar Ugaz. He is a social worker by training with a BSW from McGill. Must be a good man. He went to McGill in 1998. And an MSW from Carleton University in 2000. He's worked as a child protection social worker at the CAS, a youth worker at the Youth Services Bureau, and mental health case manager with OCISO. He's now working with the Pinecrest Queensway Health Community Services in partnership with Canadian Mental Health Association's Ottawa branch. Omar is co-founder of the Friends of University of Hargeisa and Carleton University. He's also a member of the Canadian Association of Social Workers, the Ontario College of Social Workers, and Social Services as well. He's given talks about mental health, social issues, and CAP problems with CBC Television, CKCU Radio, and also CHIN Radio. Omar has guided at-risk youth as well as mentally ill adults through individual counseling and structured programs. This involved extensive case documentation, referrals, and goal identification, as well as communication and interaction with reviewing boards. Please give a very warm welcome to Mr. Omar Ugaz.
Thank you.
Our next presenter is Ms. Abdiya Sheikh Ahmed. Abdiya is a development professional with over 30 years of experience dealing with issues relating to development, civil societies, diplomacy, communications, conflict and fragility, refugees, and grassroots community development. She's currently working for the World Bank's Corporate and External Relations branch. Abdiya also brings a wealth of experience in conflict resolution, peace building, and grassroots community development. She is well versed in issues affecting women in Africa, and particularly those living in conflict-affected countries such as Somalia. Abdiya is a former diplomat at the Somali Embassy in Washington, D.C., and worked for the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Somalia. She holds an MPA from the American University in Washington, as well as a BA from the Somali National University. On a volunteer capacity and as an activist, Abdiya co-founded the Adar Foundation and the Somali Parents Group in Greater Washington, D.C. while raising a family. Please give a warm welcome to Ms. Abdiya Sheikh. And our final presenter is Ms. Muna Ali. Muna Ali is in the MA program of Interdisciplinary Studies at York University. She is the founder of Geshanti Unity. She has moved fluidly from fields including social work to mental health, community development to community programming, and artistic management to artistic production. Muna has acted as a facilitator between the multiple generations that make up the Somali community, trying to build bridges using her work, which support growth through a variety of mediums. She's also been active in the global Somali diaspora, supporting the efforts of the Hargeisa International Book Festival and the annual Somali Week Festival in London, England. Currently, she remains active in leading Geshanti Unity, works at the Canadian Mental Health Association, and serves as an executive producer at Refuge Productions. Please give a very warm welcome to Ms. Muna Ali. So I think we'll begin with Omar. I think each panelist will have about 5 to 10 minutes to speak, following which we will have a discussion. Please go ahead.
Thank you. Okay, can I ask you first to stand up? All of you, if you can. Can I ask that everyone raise his hand like this? His hands. Shake all about this. Okay, thank you very much. I've done more, but that's part of the mental health. Sit down. Change. To show that mental health affects every behavior, every action, thinking, feeling, Okay? So that's why I asked you to stand up a little bit and just experience the change of our behavior and how it affects our mental health. This presentation, I just wanted to put together parenting, how we parent, and the positive mental health, how it affects our parenting, how it affects our raising our children, and so on. Now, let us see how mental health is supported, just like the physical health. The way we think, as I say, the way we feel, the way we behave, the way we act, all that affects our way of living, our way of seeing things, our way of working with others, interacting with others, and that is how mental health affects us. Now, going to as a parent, I think we have experienced how raising children is very difficult, and at the same time how it's rewarding. And in between that, there's a lot of dynamics that influence our life and our way of raising the children. So what we want from our children? We wanted them to stand on their feet. We want them to be capable. We wanted them to make their own world. But still, you know, many of us here are parents, we don't want to give them to grasp it, or at least acquire that experience to become full person, or to eventually stand their own feet. So this is the dynamic. This is, you know, this comes, this is where it comes, how we and the children get together, get along, our children. What do you think about other people? Our neighbors, our relatives, whether they are immediate relatives or extended relatives, family members. I want just to present this as a dialogue. Now I want to put emphasis on our families here in Canada. When we came, mostly here, we came 1990s. But we didn't know much about the situation, the life here, the schooling system, what kind of help that we need or available here. So, and that is how that affected our way of parenting. The other thing that I want to just touch is self-esteem. It said that self-esteem is equated as a weapon that protects children from drugs, from alcohol, unhealthy relationships, delinquents. But still, when we came here, according to small research that I have done, words like self-esteem, anxiety, depression were not part of our language at that time, or were not when we were new to here to Canada, and to some extent it seemed that it affected our parenting, our way of parenting. Many parents find difficult coping with the children's repetitive, uncooperative behavior. That's not only Somalis, but it happens for all parents. It happens to all parents in the world. This is what we call conduct disorder. Okay? When it comes to discipline, housing rules, things like that. Children they show rebel behavior. They show behavior that's against their family. They show behavior that's not helping the family ways of life, or the family's way of life. They are against the parents' leadership sometimes. They want to lead instead of the mother or the father. So that's a challenge. It's a challenge. And it seemed that when we were new here to Canada, that we were not prepared for that. Okay. There is something that, for instance, that as a parents, we wanted to, or we expected our children to behave the way that we used to behave back home, the way we used to interact with the elders, whether they are parents or neighbor or cousins or uncle. So that expectation, didn't match here, and it's how it was part of that. That was affected us. Take for example collectivism. While back home culture was more collectivism, collective responsibility. Here it appears that collectivism is not that much promoted here in Canada. Individualism is more promoted rather than that much. So it seemed that we were not prepared also for that. Then there was another culture, for instance, that we had, which was not here in Canada. For example, there is a Somali saying that says, "Rak wa hooyadi budhi." The way we used to raise, it was easier, and we expected that to be like easy. Rak wa hooyadi budhi, in English, it could be a child needs only his mother. If he gets his mother, that's okay. So many parents, when they came here, they didn't care that much. They were thinking that if they have their mother, everything will be okay, no problem. There was another saying that used to say, "Dinku ilmihiisa daymadu ku koriyaa." It could be in Somali, in English, a Tartar raises his child or its child by looking at it. And that seems something like, okay, have a child, get a good mother or a mother, and then everything else will be okay. So that was something that, has been in our mind, for instance, for example, or maybe, but I doubt it didn't work here. There was also another issues that impaired our parenting, such as lack of trust, fear of each other or from each other, anxiety. We didn't have that back home. Everybody was good. All neighbors were good. They used to. There was no fear that if the child is outside, that something will happen. Something natural is going to happen. Here, it was different. It is still different, and it created a fear and anxiety. There are, for instance, now let me stop with one thing. When many of Somali parents, when many of you who are in front of me grew up here in Canada, it was only single parent, like especially mother, and it happened that there was a lot of stress, there was a lot of anxiety, and when the mother is unhappy, the whole family becomes unhappy. It's not like when the father is unhappy. When the father is happy, it's okay. He can, yeah. he can hide it if he wants, or he will not pass to the other part of the or members of the family. But inevitably, automatically, when the mother is unhappy, the whole family becomes unhappy. That's the research. That's what the researchers are saying. And that's what we have seen. I saw that. Okay. Now, there are other things that which could be part of our the way that we raise our children, like stories. Stories about, we tell our children stories. Okay, those stories affected our parents. Like religious stories, good. As far as I research it, it's good. It has a reasoning even when you are going to when it's about health, because children like fairness. Children like to see the reason. So in a religious, whether it's, I have a good idea about Islamic religion, Christian and Judaism, all of them, that is a reasonable. If you are going to the to hell even, there's a way. There are options. So it's okay when there is options. And that's why we recommend give your child options always when you are disciplining the children. So these are good. The religions are good. There are other stories that we tell our children, but it affects their also way of life, which is like Tegar Shidar, Qayb Libah. Those are entertainment. Some of them, mostly they are okay, according to my research. But there are few stories. It's called, some of them are called Nakder Dimatay, Baday Mel Ibane, Wabadare Sidel Lodege, Iwihilamila. When I was, child, one of the things that I hated was the Wabadare Sidel Lodege. It's about a figure. It wasn't male, it's half. It's also, her name was from Gruf. It's half, one eye, one leg, one arm, and then the people would want to rid of it. They can't, and then they have to go away from where they were to a far place, take longer trips, and then after they settle, this Hunguruf immediately comes and will say, "Oh, Wabadari is the Lord." The people have, it's a kind of, oh, very tired. Is everybody okay? I'm very tired. And the family were thinking that they, okay, they were thinking that they left, and then they walk in miles and they are safe. So the reason why I took this is because we have to think of what we are telling. The other thing is the tribalism, tribal things or clan stories, that when you are saying, okay, the variable clan so and so is not good, they don't like our clan. This is something that our children are taking, and then they are drowning in that. But unfortunately, we want to live in our children. Our children, it's not their interest. Their interest is to tell them, okay, there was, in a positive way, there was a civil war. It happened because of our ignorance, that we didn't know how it's destructive, that we didn't know how it's affecting us. Unfortunate, it was bad. You can go through that positive channel. But when we are still telling our children what we have here, it's not their interest. Their interest is to get united. Their interest is to forgive and forget, and their interest is that they ask each other, okay, this happened, but where we can go from here? So let us move on. Now, there's no time, but I have to conclude. The recommendation is we did good. Thanks for our parents. Thank you. Thank us and parents too. we did a lot of things. But there was a challenge, and still there will be challenge. So what I will recommend is, there are some wisdom or wise people say. They say, for instance, and I want to share with you, they say, count your blessings, not your problems. Think positive so that positive thing will happen. Always remind yourself that it's okay to be, you're not to be perfect. We like to be perfect always. That's negative. Nobody's perfect. Only the Creator is perfect. That's what we believe. Always remind yourself that it's okay then, not to be perfect. Decide every morning that you are in a good mood. That's part of the good mental health. There is no elevator to success. Unfortunately, we have to take the stairs. So every time you have a challenge, remember those wisdom. We can't appreciate good days without the bad ones. Okay, this one I like. Problems are like washing machine. They twist us, spin us, and knock us around. But at the end, we come out cleaner, brighter, and better before. So problems, okay. No problem. Just accept it and absolutely hope that you will go on. You will move on. You know what the Chinese, I like Chinese, what they say, the problem, they say opportunity or chance. That's their terminology. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Our next presenter is Abdiya Sheikh Ahmed.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. In the name of God, the most merciful, the most compassionate. I did not prepare anything. I didn't do any research, and I didn't read any books because I thought I am a walking book myself. I raised 6 kids of my own, 2 sisters that I brought with me, and 6 that came after the Civil War. Those of my sisters and my sister could not come with them. And finally, I decided to work with the Somali community, the youth and the parents, because I figured it was a very hard job. And unless I share the responsibilities and the pain and the stories, I would not succeed. And I thought it was selfish to work only with my kids and my family and ignore the rest of the community. So that's what I want to share with you today. My topic is parenting in a multicultural. Yes, exactly, cross-cultural. So we came here in these countries, whether it's Canada or US, where I'm from, which is not that much different. We came here with kids. We came here with values. We came here with religion. We came here with a way of life. We came here with something that we cherish. But then we came to another society. We kind of invaded them in their own life, their own way of life. So it is, in a way, our responsibility and their responsibility so that we can accept each other and we work together. Because it's their responsibility, because also they accepted us to come here. If they close their doors like some other countries that we know, you know who I'm talking about, our closest friends and brothers and sisters, which are very close to our country. If they accepted us, it would have been different. So people in the West, or whether it's Holland or Canada or US or Germany or UK, they accepted us. So it is a it's we have to all find a way to work together. So it's a win-win situation. We came here and people welcomed us in a way. They provided us maybe shelter, legal documents, maybe help for a while. But we have to work hard. That doesn't mean that we are trading our values. that doesn't mean we are giving up our religion, our values, our kids, and our future, because we want to be strong communities within other communities that are ready to help other communities that we left behind. So when you face that kind of challenge, it's very difficult, but you have to you have to prioritize. So while your kids are learning the language, while they are still young and pre-K, if you have that chance, it's better to move forward and quickly yourself, to improve yourself, to try to learn the language and all the tricks of the country, to be ahead of them, so that, because we know the stories that parents who did not get that opportunity had problems with the kids coming back from the school and saying, "Mom, this is a letter that says I'm perfect." But the parents cannot read, so they think, "Oh, my son is perfect," which means the child was expelled from school for 5 days. So those kind of things, we all learned that lessons. So fortunately, I was kind of a little bit ahead of my kids, and I had the opportunity to go to school before they get into the high school and the middle school, which are the most difficult part of life. And I was able to guide them. I was able to be their role model. I knew that there are multiple role models in school and in the communities, but also I wanted to have my kids with me all the time in terms of the mental, not the physical. Physical, they will be somewhere and I will be somewhere. But how to keep them engaged and think about you. Kids are very smart. If they see you are not ahead of them. You don't know what they're talking about. You don't know what you're talking about. Really, they make decisions quickly and they move on. And then it's very hard to catch up. So, what are the things that we can do to be able that our children succeed in this country, but also be with us? You don't have to give up your kids saying, "Oh, they became Canadian, we have nothing to do with each other, I'm going back to Somalia." That's not the way to go. You have to engage and try your best to keep your kids with you. And to do that, Somali women and Somali men are very, very, very smart and very resilient, and especially the mothers, because the mothers are the really, if someone loses the mother or the father, it's better to lose the father. I'm sorry, I'm not wishing anybody, I'm not wishing anybody to lose their father, but the mother,
In the diaspora or the back?
both. So, I would like to answer questions, but I kind of get distracted. You have to be ahead of the kids. You have to be engaged. You want your kids to be religious and go to the mosque, but you don't want them to join radical ideas. So how to do that? Especially when the kids are in teenage situation, they really face a very conflicting situation. They don't know what to do. I remember one of my kids came to me when he was 10th grade, and he said, "Mom, I want you to know, I want you to just not to go to school. I want to study Islam. I want to study religion." I said, "I love my religion, but I know the reality is not that way." I knew he was going through a growth period when he needed help and direction. So I told him, "I'm very happy. I want you to be that way too, but I want you to finish only high school. Because high school has an age limit. If you finish high school, you can come back from the university or college a year or two after you mature or something. But when you don't finish high school and you become dropout in the high school, it's very, very difficult." So I told him, "I'm with you. As soon as you finish the school, that's what you're going to study, religion. Any country you want, you will go. Fine. Guess what? He's an engineer. he continues, he's religious too, alhamdulillah. But also he is running his life, he's on his own, as Umar was saying, he's standing on his own feet. If I die today, I'm not worried about him, whether it's Islamic side or the life in this world. So I think I still have time. I would like also to address the issue of the child, for example, the girls. They look at the mother. They want to dress beautifully. They want to work. They want to have friends and interact with their friends. You cannot keep them from that, but you have to really play the role. You dress the way you would like her to dress and fit in the community. You go to work, because if you can and able to work, unless if you don't need to work, that's fine. It's the best place to be is in the house, because if you see these countries, US or here, those who are able to leave their jobs when they have kids and they come back to their jobs when their kids grow up. We don't have that opportunity. So we have to struggle. We have to make that strong move. Improve yourself. Go to, like Sharmak was saying, when you drop off your kids, go to school. Improve your language skills. Improve your understanding to the cultures, and so you can reason with your kid. What do you want to tell your daughter? Don't do this, don't do that, don't do this, don't do that. It doesn't work. Show them what you want them to do by example. By example. Try yourself very hard, mothers, especially mothers, to keep the fathers as much as you can. Hold on to them if you can. If you can't, sometimes the kids, it's better to grow up with the mother instead of conflicting ideas and things that are not very positive within the family. I will stop there and pass on someone who I think is a very good role model, who projects a very good identity, who's involved, who's a Canadian, and understand everything about this culture, but also, I'm doing a good job, but also a young person who's engaged back home, who's engaged in the community, who hopefully I hope people like her and the many people who organized this event and working tirelessly will fill the position we would like our kids to fill. And inshallah, we will have a strong community in Canada who are successful, and in the US and in everywhere, who are successful, who are connected to their homeland and help their country and their people here.
Dia, thank you very much for that fine presentation. And our next presenter is Muna Ali.
Well, thank you. Did everybody get a chance to look at the exhibit outside? Just like to tell you that was actually part of a Gashanti program that we did, where we taught young girls how to take pictures and to tell their own stories. So we are working on telling our own stories. Before I begin my presentation, which was on developing positive identity, I'd just like to talk a little bit about Gashanti, because if it wasn't for Gashanti, I don't think I would be here sitting talking about this paper. Gashanti, for those of you who don't know, is a Somali word. It's a word I grew up hearing every day in my house. You're a Gashanti now. You're a Gashanti Bai Chokta, meaning the parents can now go out because they have somebody to babysit. And I really realized that being a Gashanti came with responsibility, and that, okay, so if I'm a Gashanti, I'm responsible. There's some power in that. How can I now use that to my advantage? And so the word, and then unity is, Gashanti was that Somali part of our identity that we wanted to honor. And when we added Gashanti Unity, it was actually from a Queen Latifah song. And it was a very popular hip-hop song in the early 90s. It was about women empowerment. It was you and I type. That was something that when I came in the early 90s, we were hearing a woman on rapping that was really big for us. So when we created Gashanti, we had to really realize that there was the Somali part of our identity, and then there was the Canadian context of our identity, and we couldn't separate them. As much as our parents were like, this is not something you're supposed to do. Going outside, going to school, you're a Canadian young black woman, and that's something our parents didn't really understand. So when we created Gashanti, it was 7 young women came together. We created a space that was alternative to the home, alternative to the masjid, alternative to everywhere we were told you don't fit. And that place is where we discussed what we wanted to talk about, how we strategized and how we built. And we're like, you know what, we want programs that talk about friendship. We want programs that are all the things that we weren't getting, we had to create for ourselves. And the best way we did that was we modeled that within ourselves. There were 7 of us. There was also the hijabi, not hijabi thing. So in our group, there was that. Like, there was everything, you name it. We were like, how do we battle that conversation that's happening about us that we're not part of? So Gashanti was created. It's been going on since 2007. We have a space. We have different young women that are with us. Right now we have Hola, who's a George Brown College student who's doing her placement with us, who's here. And I'm actually in school right now doing my master's on case study on Gashanti. So the paper I'm going to present to you guys is actually something I wrote and I would like to share with you, as I think this is the first space I would like to share in a Somali context. Because for me, presenting this paper in another university where there's not a lot of Somali women, I want to hear what you guys think about this, because this is a conversation I think we don't get to have with our mothers and our aunts, and they don't understand our story even though we understand them, because we're not communicating. Because they're like, oh, Hoya doesn't understand. We're not doing Hoya justice when we say that. I think we have to be able to be brave enough to have the conversation with you. So here we go. In the Somali Canadian community, one of the largest East African diaspora in North America, where gender, tribe, race, religion, and other differences is experienced intersect for a complex nuance, emerging identities. Second-generation Canadians, specifically in Toronto, face serious challenges when navigating their intergenerational gaps between their immigrant parents, their Canadian peers, and negotiating their own shifting identities. Self-identified young Somali women living in with the context of the Canadian, where racism, Islamophobia, male dominations are everyday experiences. We also face additional challenges, not only due to our gender and our race, but also due to the traditionalist, patriarchal aspects of the Somali culture. There is also forces against which we must work to establish our identities, and our Somali Canadian increasingly determined challenge. Our Somali Canadian women are increasingly determined to challenge these limiting identities. So I want to carve out a purpose. The purpose of this paper is to carve out an alternative space within this current debate about gender, class, race, and religion. Reimagine the boundaries, that intersectionalities that occupy, that we can recognize our own experiences as Somali Canadian women. The argument that is being made here, that there are a generation of young Somali women like myself, are strong feminists who are empowered both by their Somali heritage and their blackness, and their by their Somali heritage and their blackness, in a new way of thinking of identity in terms of the past, present, and the future. Like you guys talked about earlier, in terms of the women who are the Somali women, Hawa Taka, like Hawa Jibril. I think coming into Canada, we also need to realize that we have so many things as young Somali women. We're Somali, we're Muslim, we're black, and we're women. Sometimes I feel like we're at the bottom of the food chain, to be honest. And I think that's something that we have to talk about, not only with our parents, but also our peers, and realizing in this society, when I walk around, I'm seen as a black woman first. Then my name is written, Ali. Ooh, where are you from? Then you see that, oh, Somalia. So there's all these identities that we have, and I think the best way to deal with that is to be okay with all of them, and to be okay with, only representing one part of yourself sometimes, because maybe that's the safest for you. Sometimes I'll be in a space and a woman looks at me, they don't realize I'm Muslim. But at that moment, do I want to be Muslim if they're talking about Islamophobia, or do I want to take that challenge? And I think that's something about being okay is something that we don't get to hear. That message of, it's okay to be Canadian, it's okay to be Somali, it's okay to be Muslim, it's okay to be a woman, it's okay to be whatever you want, whenever you want. And I think sometimes at home we're told, you're Somali, inam batahay, that's already challenging. I already know that. I'm trying to figure out how all of those work together. But I think the best thing that we could do is create conversations with ourselves, create conversations with our parents, and also respect our culture. I think one of the biggest things that Gashanti has is our slogan. We're anchored in our culture and we're focused in our future. And I think that's one thing that we don't get enough of. Learning about our culture, learning about our history, learning about our language. And sometimes when you don't speak the language as a young Somali woman, you feel disconnected. You feel like you're already outside. And parents make fun of you when you can't speak. Oh, she can't pronounce the words right. And I think that also turns us off from not speaking our language. And I think the best thing we could do is encourage us to read things, encourage us to look up Somali websites, or encourage us to take interest without making us feel like you're in between. I'm okay with being an in between. I can speak the language, I can understand it, but I prefer to speak English. I went back home for the first time in 2012, and honestly, I didn't feel at home there either, because I've been here longer, but I'm still Somali wherever I go, and I'm proud of that. And I think that's what we need to do. We need to have more people to say, I'm okay being Somali, and I'm proud of that. And I think that's the message, where when we do programs like the photography program, is to show young women that whatever image of them, the Somali woman that doesn't exist, we need to create it. Because everyone's going to talk about the history of what happened. We need to create what's new. And I'd like to end there.
Muna, thank you very much. So I'd like to encourage any of you, if you have any questions or comments to make, feel free to pose them. I think maybe I'll begin with a question, because Muna, you were talking about the importance of conversation and the importance of creating a safe space where you can be yourself, where you can tell your own story. Can you elaborate a bit more on that? Can you talk about the effect that being a part of Gashanti, like what did being part of Gashanti do for you in terms of your own personal development?
Well, it definitely gave me the confidence to be in a space and say that, yes, I'm Somali. And even though there's so much negative images of what a Somali person is, either we're on TV for being pirates, for starvation. So it's like, for especially, and for women, it was like, there was always that image of, oh, you're a Somali woman. Do you know Iman? Ayan Hirsi? Those are the only two images that exist of Somali women in the mainstream media. So that told me that I had to create other diverse Somali women images. And for us, we talked about this, but programs like the Portrait of a Lady, where the photography program that we created was, here's a tool, which is a camera. Let's learn how to use it. Let's learn how to tell a story, and let's display that in a public space and take up space. That's what Gashanti did for me. It gave me the opportunity to learn how to organize, to learn how to create space that wasn't there for me. And I had to do that with other young women who also shared that vision with me and who shared that drive.
Thank you. Abdia, could you elaborate on that as well? And in terms of just the importance of creating spaces where you can have conversation, but particularly conversations between generations.
Exactly. I don't know if you heard, but there's in my area, in Virginia, they created an imam of a masjid, a young man who grew up in the U.S., was an imam at the masjid, and he thought he was imam for adults only, and he was losing the youth. So he created a place called Make Space. He was using an ayah from the Quran, which says, I think, يا أيها الذين آمنوا تفسحوا في المساجد يفسح الله لكم. he was using that, and he created a space for the youth, because I can understand where she's coming from. They need, first of all, the youth needs acceptance and understanding. We have to appreciate what we brought them here, another culture, which is much stronger than ours here. So I can understand why she found this kind of space, and I think it's good for the youth that they find these kind of engagements, because once they engage in this kind of activities, as she said, they learn about their history, they learn about how to organize, and they contribute to the future of the ones behind them.
And they share strategies amongst themselves.
Yeah. So I think it's very, very positive, and I appreciate what you're doing, guys.
Omar, what does the literature tell us about the value of conversation and dialogue and creating these kinds of public spaces, creating our own institutions? What does the literature say?
My understanding is, if we wanted to understand each other, then we have to accept. I have to accept who you are. You have to accept who I am too. So, if you have to accept also the situation, we have to accept what's true now. For example, when many parents came here to Canada, most of the male or fathers appear to be not accepting what's true now here in Canada. Here, there's something new. And to adjust that new things, you have to accept the change. But because of what we had back at home, the way we used to behave, the role play is not here. And then the other role play is still here. So that is, I think that was the cause of the many conflicts and breakdowns when it comes to the family. So accept what's true now, accept the situation, accept me who I am, who I will accept you who you are. Thank you.
Uncle Umar Ogas, you just actually kind of partly answered my question in terms of accepting the life that we live in now and accepting our situation. But I feel like sometimes for the older generation too, like you said, there is that mindset that's still stuck. There's those coping mechanisms that we had from back home that we try to enforce here. And sometimes accepting it can only be just a thought, and it's not really a reality. So my question is, how can they accept? What strategies do you recommend that they can accept? Because I have neighbors who have just come to the country, and I see the daily struggles that they have. Moving into a 5-bedroom apartment with 7 children, and going from a place where they had the help of the community to raise their kids, and coming here and facing those challenges by themselves, and sometimes even dealing with so much more that they cannot speak of. And I see the struggles that they go through, and I try to be some kind of force for them. But sometimes just accepting your situation, it's not entirely enough. There needs to be coping mechanisms that are put into place and into practice so that we can see this unfortunate mental health stigma that we're having here as Canadians, where 3 out of 10 of us are dealing with some kind of mental illness. So we need effective coping mechanisms for the older generation. So what would you suggest? That's my question.
Thank you. When I got those questions, I will, I'm a counselor. I do counseling. And exactly when I got those, this is very hard question, and there's not much counseling, by the way. Number 1. Number 2, I have, can I ask you, for instance, what do you think if you cannot accept, what else you can do? Can I ask?
A lot of us come with this mentality where we say,
individualism.
Individualism.
Yeah, my own identity. Independence. Go ahead, thank you.
But sometimes that can be a force on its own, but sometimes you need a sense of support, having that support where you talk to people about your issues. But within our culture, it's my problem, it's my issue, I'm going to deal with it. But sometimes you need something else besides that. And I feel like that is a hard mentality that's hardwired within the older generation where they don't want to break that. But in the essence of mental health, in order to get past these things, you need to talk about what it is that's bothering you. You need to go and seek professional help. So accepting is one thing, but also seeking that help is another thing that needs to be spoken about within our community. So, like, how do we get that across?
I agree with you. Thank you very much. You know what? There is no right and wrong in a sense of counseling. What is right is what works for you. What's wrong is what doesn't work for you. If it fits, it's okay. If it doesn't fit, it's not okay. So, and that depends. Now, communication. It matters, the way we communicate. If you wanted to, for instance, in terms of the child or the children, listen your child. That's what we recommend. Listen what he, she feels. Stop other things, because children, they don't know. They don't have the capacity to understand with you your priorities. Even if you are cooking, stop. That's what the literature is saying. Stop cooking. It's so important, and you are preparing her food or his food. See? So, talk, communication, listen. That listening tells your child that she, he matters. Important. And then because of that communication comes the reconciliation, reconciling. And that's how it... I'm not looking something perfect. I'm looking something that we can go together and work together and do together and understand. See, share. Thank you.
I'm going to allow 2 more questions because I get the sense that there's a need for this conversation, right? So there's a question over here.
السلام عليكم سؤال عمر باسكره عمر هدان dhegeysanay maanta shirka wixii lagu sheegay oo dhan there is a strength iyo shaqo wanaag ummadda Soomaaliyeed dhan dhamaanteed laakiin especially hooyooyinka Soomaaliyeed marka runtii qofku markay ku dhacdo wixii gabdhaha Soomaaliyeed ku dhacay oo kale one of waxyaabaha ay sameeyeen waxaa ka mid ah wax la yiraahdo way suppress gareeyeen emotionada iyo feelingka muxuu ahayto ku hareereysnaa saysan uga cabsanin xaaladda ay markaas face gareynayeen oo ay geesi u noqdaan so there was a lot of feeling that they numb it in order to go through the situations in order to go to school in order to deal with 5 children waxaas oo dhan say u sameeyaan and they numb some of the situations that's coming to their brain and immediate thinking by way joojiyeen and then they just keep going oo waxay aad bay u shaqeynayeen sida ay u face gareyn lahaayeen waxyaabaha horyaal marka aniga adigu waan ognahay social workers who is dhammaan sir in the home Fusia and Florence Abdi dad badan baa jooga social worker ka bartay marka no matter how much you numb it traamaha waxyaabaha aad noloshaada ku soo martay way soo laabanayaan way soo noqonayaan so markay soo noqdaan you need to know what to do next so walaal waxaan ka codsan lahaa inaad haday wax service ah hadda yani jiraan oo dadku haday waxyaabahaas ay riyo ugu yimaadaan haday waxyaabahaas socod ugu yimaadaan si ay ula diil gareeyaan waxaad u rukumandaareen kartid inay jiraan hadda oo kale service noocaas oo kale taa dadku ka qayb gali karo sababtoo ah inaad wax mar walba dejisid iyo inaad la diil gareyso waxa ka wanaagsan inaad markiiba de waxay intaad for example narrative therapy oo kale taa waxay leedahay problemkiisa laakiin qofku solutionkiisa quruxdiisa uu leeyahay marka in dadka waxaas kala loo sheego oo sida biyaha iyo muxuu ahayto ay saliid u kala kormaraan ayaa dhibaatadu yani aysan qofka kamid ahayn mar walba banaanka ka taaganta marka waxyaabo noocaas oo kale wax yar inaad ka taabtid jeclaan lahaa but at the same time hadii service jiraan right now no inaad ugu dartid so inshallah
thank you I think this thanks Sarah I think this focuses mostly on the Somali speakers there is a lot of services but there is particular counseling services work in clinic that's Sarah and I have started now at the Somali Center every Wednesday. You just come up, show up, and then we will deal with you. If you want to talk life, whether it's mental health, whether it's family, whether it's everything that you think needs, you want to get help. So if you want that help, we will be there for you at the Somali Center for Family Services. I think it's 1970 Bank Street. Is that? Yeah, 1719 Bank Street, second floor. Wednesday, every Wednesday. It's 11 to 5. 11 morning to 5 p.m. So please come forward, show up. It's very, very confidential. So don't worry about that. It's very confidential. You can share with us. Thank you very much.
This is a question for Muna. You mentioned being a black woman a couple times during your speech, and I think that's something that we don't talk about a lot in Somali circles. So I just wanted to know, what's your experience in bringing up blackness and race in Somali spaces that we don't often talk about?
I think the first thing is it's definitely a generational conversation, understanding race within our parents. They didn't have to deal with race. Race was not a problem. We grew up in a Somali culture where everybody was black. So I think for them coming to Canada and then realizing race was a player in this game and our parents not really dealing with it, and then us as young people are knowing the relationship that parents have with race, and then you growing up and knowing that sometimes within the black community, you can also be not black enough. So we kind of feel race in two ways. But I think the first conversation is definitely within the parents, realizing that in a Canadian context, we are black. We need to accept that, and we need to deal with that ASAP. Because as your child walks around as a young black man, he's going to be, oh, yep, card him as black. And as a young woman, that same thing too. So then there's, as us growing up in, and owning ourselves. But I feel like the biggest thing is to understand when people interview for a job, when you're going in to get services, no one's going to see Somali first. Look at me right now. You're not going to see anything about me that's Somali. If I was wearing a hijab, you're like, oh, okay, that's why Somali. But that is something like there's no need to be hesitant in realizing that, yes, as you move around this world, there's so many parts of your identity that people are going to see first. And sometimes you'd be like, oh, no, I'm not black. No, I've had friends who say that are Somali. And I'm like, you can't deny the skin of your color. Like, you are walking. That's the first thing I see. And I think the reason why we are having that friction is because our parents don't know about this. This is something that they're learning right now. And I think as young people, that's something that we can help bridge that gap and say, Mom, this is something that we need to talk about.
My question is for Abdiya Sheikh Ahmed. So, Abdiya, now that you discounted the role of the father in the house, I just want to ask you a question. I have friends from other cultures, immigrants as well, Southeast Asians, Pakistanis, Chinese, and so on. And generation after generation, they're keeping up the language that they came with, the mother tongue from homeland. Will you then accept, Abdiya, now that the father is discounted from the role of the kids, that the mother is responsible for the girls that spoken here and boys who are only struggling with Somali or speaking English?
I knew I was going to get that. First of all, I'm not discounting the fathers. We wanted the fathers not to discount themselves. They should be the breadwinners. They should be the role models. They should be the head of the household. I didn't do anything to discount that. I hope they are. What I was trying to say is, from nurturing point of view, the mother is very important. She is the school. She is the school of the child from the womb to until they are on their own. Rag waa hooyadii. That's what he told me. Rag waa hooyadii. So to continue, the most beautiful family is the family where the father is the head of the household, and the mother is very happy mother. As people were saying, the mother has to be, if the mother is happy, everyone is happy. So I'm not discounting the father. If you felt that way, please engage and play your role as a father.
Thank you very much.
So I'll be really quick. What I heard you say a few times as well, conversations and not being afraid to talk to our elderly parents or, parents in general. What are some solutions that you might have? Are there safe spaces where we can have these dialogues with parents? Do you suggest starting up, parent circles? What are some suggestions that you've done with Gashanti?
One second, and we'll take the other question as well at the same time.
I want to say thank you to Muna and both Abdia and Umar as well. But I, as a parent who raised kids and have had to negotiate the race card in Canada and also the whole blackness, right? The rest of the world doesn't have this color identity. It's in North America. So I know that two things against the Somali parents. One is they come from an ethnically homogeneous society, that everybody was Somali when they were growing up. And the next thing is also the color identity is a North American thing and maybe Western thing. But very importantly, I think, in addition to your emphasis on race, I would emphasize biculturality. I think a healthy identity is an identity that is going to embrace that you're not going to be a Canadian only or a Somali only. So the sooner we have the conversation that a healthy bicultural identity is what is needed here. And I will own that the parents might be too judgmental and say, you're too Canadian or you are too this. But I think the conversation at the kitchen tables of the Somali community and every immigrant community is to allow your generation to carry what is good from both cultures. And I just wanted to throw that in there.
Thank you, Luna. In your own discussion, you talked about the importance of accepting the complexity of oneself.
So for the parents, intergeneration stuff, what we've done is we have these things called Shahan Shirko, where we just come together and really honor the way our parents talk to. And what we did was there was issues that came out of that Shahan Shirko, which was all female focused. Then we took some themes that keep recurring, that is just the relationship with mothers. Then what we did was we actually took that to young mothers, our mothers, first and foremost. And then we invited my mom, a few of her friends, and we had that conversation. We had one stick where everyone could speak only when they had that stick. And it was very challenging, but honestly, it was so rewarding at the end because there were so many things that we learned. We learned that they are operating from fear. All they're scared is that they're going to lose the culture, the traditions, everything that they held so dear to come here with, and that they don't mean bad things. They're just scared. So when they realized that's where they're operating for, they're a little bit more lenient in how we organize Gashanti, because we were the biggest threat in Scarborough for a while in Toronto. Gashanti, every day they're out. Gashanti, they're doing something opposite of what a Gashanti was supposed to do. But then when we realized that we had these conversations with them and we're like, we're just trying to live and trying to survive and trying to thrive. And we need you to understand that in the space that we are in, every day is about networking. Every day is about meeting new people that can help you advance yourself. So realizing that they're scared of, we're going to ditch the culture. And we're like, no, we're honoring the culture. We respect the culture. We love the culture. And then they're like, okay, we can work. But then we also had a celebration event where it was called Inanwa Hoyeded, where we celebrated them. We all wore daras. We had Somali food. And I think every time we did an event that was very culturally, it was winning more hearts. And it was winning, and I think that's that balance we have to do. We have to basically do what we want to do, but then also be able to make sure that they're part of our learning and they're part of our conversations. And for Zia, I don't remember what your question was, but
it was a comment about just the importance of embracing the complexity.
And I think for me, it was I think that's the biggest thing. It's like you don't hear a lot of people that tell you that you could embrace. It's like it's not a message. It's really done hush hush. But I think that's what we have to do with Gashanti or with ourselves to say, it's okay, I'm Somali, I'm Canadian, I'm a Black, I'm Muslim. I'm all of those at all times when I want to be, and it's my choice. But I'm okay with saying that I am happy with all of that right now.
Thank you very much. Very quickly, just as we come to an end of this very fine panel, one thing that I know that has worked in many different communities is oral history projects. And I'm sure that perhaps this idea has been employed within the community. But I know that the idea of getting young people interviewing some of the older people, or young women interviewing their mothers, their grandmothers, and actually affirming them by allowing them to tell their stories. That's a project, for example, a good friend of mine in Alabama who's a teacher did that with a lot of civil rights pioneers in Montgomery, Alabama. And he got a lot of the young people to interview these older folks who weren't necessarily in front of the cameras in the 1950s and 1960s, but who had their own stories to tell. And it was really something that helped to kind of bring the community together. And I think the older people felt affirmed because they felt as if they were finally able to tell a story, and the young people were respecting them for the story that they were telling. So that might be, the idea of an oral history project might also be something that could be of use within the community. That brings us to the end of this fine panel. Please give our panelists a very warm welcome. Thank you.